You sat in that doctor's office. You heard the words type 2 diabetes. And in that moment, everything you thought you knew about your health shifted. Maybe they handed you a pamphlet. Maybe they told you to cut your carbs, lose weight, and come back in 3 months. Maybe they mentioned a number, 7%, and told you that getting your A1C below that threshold was the goal, the benchmark, the proof that things were improving. And so you went home and you did what any determined, disciplined person does. You cleared out your pantry. You stopped eating bread. You stopped eating pasta. You stopped eating everything that felt remotely enjoyable. You are living on grilled chicken and steamed broccoli, and you are doing it with real commitment. And yet, 3 months later, your A1C is 7.4, or 7, 6, or it barely moved at all. That is not a willpower failure. That is not a character flaw. That is a biological mechanism that nobody explained to you. And today I am going to explain it completely. Here is the hard truth, and I am going to say it plainly because you deserve directness. If you do not fix one specific underlying metabolic dysfunction first, before you change anything else about your diet, no amount of carbohydrate restriction will drop your A1C below 7%. You can eat perfectly for 3 months and still miss the target. Because the problem is not what you are eating. The problem is a broken signaling system inside your pancreas. That system is called the first phase insulin response. And understanding it and knowing exactly how to begin restoring it is the single most important piece of information a newly diagnosed adult over 60 can have. We will get there. But first, I need to explain what is actively making things worse right now, because there is a strong chance you are doing it this morning. The most common thing a newly diagnosed senior does in the first 30 days after diagnosis is eliminate carbohydrates almost entirely, and it makes complete intuitive sense. Carbohydrates become glucose. Glucose is the problem. So remove the carbohydrates, remove the glucose. Problem solved, except it is not solved, and here is precisely why. Your liver does not know that you are eating carefully. Your liver does not read food labels. Your liver does not have access to your medical chart. Your liver operates on signals. Specifically, it monitors the level of glucose in your blood, the presence of insulin, and the presence of incoming carbohydrates from your digestive tract. When all three of those signals drop dramatically, as they do when you cut carbs severely overnight, your liver interprets that as an emergency, not as healthy eating, not as discipline, as starvation. And your liver's response to starvation is immediate, automatic, and precise. It activates a process called hepatic gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis means glucose production. Specifically, your liver takes stored glycogen, which is glucose that was saved earlier and packed away in your liver cells, and it converts that stored glycogen back into free glucose and dumps it directly into your bloodstream. This dump happens on a schedule. It is not random. Your liver performs its most aggressive gluconeogenesis release between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., while you are completely asleep, while you have not eaten in 8 or 9 hours, while your last meal was as clean and carbohydrate-free as possible. You wake up at 7 a.m. You check your fasting glucose. It is 138 or 145, and you did not eat a single carbohydrate the night before. This is what I call the starvation paradox. The harder you restrict, the more aggressively your liver compensates. And the more aggressively your liver compensates, the higher your fasting glucose stays, regardless of how disciplined your diet is. In adults over 60 with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, this cycle is particularly entrenched. Your liver has been compensating for years of impaired insulin signaling. It has developed very strong, deeply practiced gluconeogenesis patterns. Simply removing carbohydrates does not dismantle those patterns, it intensifies them. To dismantle them, you need to address the upstream mechanism that controls them, the one that governs whether your liver trusts the insulin signal enough to stand down. And that mechanism is the first phase insulin response. Your pancreas releases insulin in 2 distinct phases. Most people, and frankly, most general practitioners, discuss only the second phase. But the first phase is the one that determines everything about how your blood sugar behaves in the 30 minutes after you eat. Here is how to understand the difference. Think of your pancreas like a fire station. The first phase insulin response is the truck already sitting in the bay. Engine warm, crew ready, door open. The moment a call comes in, the moment glucose begins entering your bloodstream, that truck launches immediately. It arrives before the fire spreads. It keeps the situation contained from the very beginning. The second phase response is the backup crew, the additional trucks called in after the first wave. They are essential when the fire is large, but they are not fast. And if the first truck never showed up, if first phase insulin failed to launch, by the time the backup arrives, the fire has already spread significantly. In type 2 diabetes, the first phase insulin response is the function that degrades first. It becomes sluggish. The stored insulin does not launch promptly. Glucose enters your bloodstream from your meal. The fire starts. And your pancreas is still getting the second truck out of the station when your blood sugar is already at 180. This is the mechanism that carb restriction alone cannot fix, because carb restriction reduces the fuel load, but it does not repair the fire station. The truck is still slow, the response is still impaired, And the moment a carbohydrate does arrive, at a restaurant, at a family dinner, anywhere in real life, the spike is disproportionate and damaging. To begin restoring first-phase insulin sensitivity, you need to do something that seems counterintuitive given everything you have been told. You need to prime your system before glucose arrives, not restrict, prime. This is called the reverse loading sequence. Here's how it works. 15 to 20 minutes before you consume any complex carbohydrate, you consume a specific combination of healthy fat and soluble fiber. Not a large quantity, not a full meal, a small, precise primer. The healthy fat, something like half a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil or half a small avocado, begins slowing gastric emptying immediately. This is the mechanical pacing mechanism. It regulates how fast the subsequent carbohydrate will reach your small intestine and begin converting to glucose. The soluble fiber, something like a tablespoon of ground flaxseed in warm water or a few stalks of celery, forms the gel matrix in your small intestine that we discussed in a previous video. It coats the intestinal wall before the carbohydrate glucose wave arrives. But here is the most critical part of what the primer does. The presence of fat and fiber in the upper digestive tract triggers a hormonal signal through a peptide called GEP, or glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, that tells your pancreas that food is incoming. This signal gives your beta cells approximately 15 minutes of advance notice. That advance notice is exactly what a sluggish first-phase insulin response needs, not a surprise glucose wave, a scheduled arrival, a predictable load that the beta cells have had time to prepare stored insulin for. The result is that when the carbohydrate glucose does arrive, 15 minutes later, paced by the fat and fiber buffer, the first-phase insulin response actually fires. Not perfectly, not like a 30-year-old's pancreas, but measurably better than it did when glucose arrived without warning. Over days and weeks of applying the sequence consistently, research on beta cell rehabilitation in early type 2 diabetes patients has shown measurable improvements in first-phase insulin secretion capacity. The mechanism is trainable. It is not permanently broken, but it requires a consistent structured training stimulus to begin its recovery. Now let me show you exactly what this looks like on a real morning. Starting from the moment you wake up, the morning hours are the highest stakes metabolic window for a newly diagnosed diabetic over 60. The dawn phenomenon, the natural cortisol and growth hormone release between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m., has already primed your liver for glucose release. Your insulin sensitivity is at its lowest point of the entire day in the immediate post-wake window. What you do in the first 45 minutes after waking determines the glucose trajectory of the entire following 12 hours. Not just breakfast, the whole day. Here is the exact 3-step morning blueprint built around the reverse loading sequence. And I want to contrast it directly with what most newly diagnosed seniors are doing instead, so the difference is unmistakable. Step 1. The first thing that enters your body in the morning, the traditional approach, coffee, black, or with artificial sweetener, or nothing at all until breakfast, zero priming, zero advanced signal to the beta cells. The cellular priming approach, 8 ounces of warm water with 1 tablespoon of raw unfiltered apple cider vinegar, consumed within the first 10 minutes of waking. Here is why this specific drink works as the first step. Apple cider vinegar contains acetic acid. Clinical studies, including a well-cited trial published in Diabetes Care, have shown that acetic acid consumed before a meal reduces the post-meal glucose response by 20 to 35% in adults with type 2 diabetes. The mechanism is specific. Acetic acid inhibits certain digestive enzymes, specifically alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, that break down starch into glucose. Slower starch breakdown, slower glucose release. Additionally, the acetic acid appears to improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular level by activating AMP, a cellular enzyme that functions as a metabolic master switch, signaling cells to become more glucose receptive. This AMP activation is one of the same pathways targeted by metformin, the most commonly prescribed type 2 diabetes medication. 1 tablespoon, 8 ounces of warm water, 10 minutes after waking, that is. Step 1. Step 2. The fat and fiber primer. Consume 15 minutes after the ACV water. The traditional approach, nothing yet, or a small piece of toast. The glucose door is wide open. No buffer. No advance warning to the beta cells. The cellular priming approach, 2 soft-boiled eggs and half a medium avocado. No additional carbohydrates at this stage. This is the primer, not the full breakfast. The eggs provide approximately 12 grams of high-quality, complete protein. Protein, like fat, stimulates GEP release, the advance warning signal to the beta cells we discussed. It also triggers a peptide called GLP-1, which further enhances first-phase insulin sensitivity and slows gastric emptying in parallel. The avocado delivers oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fats that slows gastric emptying, coats the intestinal pathway, and provides the mechanical pacing buffer before any carbohydrate arrives. Together, the eggs and avocado create a 15 to 20 minute priming window in which your beta cells receive their advance warning, your gastric emptying rate slows, and your intestinal wall begins coating before a single gram of complex carbohydrate is introduced. Step 3. The complex carbohydrate. consumed 15 to 20 minutes after the eggs and avocado. The traditional approach, no carbohydrates at all, which triggers the starvation paradox we covered earlier. Or worse, a high carbohydrate breakfast consumed all at once with no primer in place. The cellular priming approach, a small serving of complex carbohydrate, specifically 1/2 cup of cooked steel-cut oats, or 1 slice of dense 100% whole grain bread, or a small serving of sweet potato. Not a full carbohydrate load, a measured, intentional carbohydrate delivery into a system that has been fully prepared to receive it. Now look at both sides of the split screen. The left side is the standard advice given to newly diagnosed diabetics. The right side is the cellular priming sequence that actually begins rehabilitating the first phase insulin response. The difference is not the total carbohydrate count. The difference is the sequence, the timing, and the priming that makes each carbohydrate gram manageable instead of damaging. What I have given you today is the foundational mechanism, the engine behind why A1C numbers that stall, and the specific actionable sequence that begins to address that stall at the cellular level. But I want to be direct with you about something important. Dropping below a 7% A1C and sustaining that is not a 7-day achievement. It is not a 30-day crash program. It is a structural journey that unfolds across approximately 3 weeks of consistent daily recalibration. Each day of that journey builds directly on the previous one. The liver learns a new pattern. The beta cells develop a more reliable priming response. The gluconeogenesis cycle weakens because the starvation signal stops arriving. And the body, your body, begins operating with the metabolic consistency it has not had since before the diagnosis. This 3-week structural recalibration is exactly what the 21-day A1C reset guide was designed to map out, day by day, meal by meal, for adults over 60 who were newly diagnosed and needed a complete, calm, scientifically grounded roadmap through this exact process. Every morning sequence in the guide is built around the reverse loading blueprint we just covered. Every dinner protocol addresses the liver gluconeogenesis pattern we discussed. Every evening recommendation is designed to protect the beta cell rest window. It is not a generic diet plan. It is a mechanistic protocol, sequenced specifically for the biology of adults over 60 navigating a new type 2 diabetes diagnosis. The guide is available through the link in the pinned comment below this video and in the description. If this is your first week post-diagnosis or your 12th month of frustration with numbers that will not move, it was built for exactly where you are right now. Before I close, let me summarize exactly what we covered today, because these are mechanisms worth carrying with you. 1. Extreme carbohydrate restriction without addressing the underlying liver gluconeogenesis cycle will keep your fasting blood sugar elevated regardless of how disciplined your diet is. 2. The first phase insulin response is the specific pancreatic function that is degraded earliest in type 2 diabetes, and it is the mechanism that determines the quality of your post-meal blood sugar response. 3. The reverse loading sequence, apple cider vinegar water, then healthy fat and protein, then a controlled complex carbohydrate 15 to 20 minutes later, begins rehabilitating the first phase response by giving the beta cells advance, warning, and the intestinal tract a protective buffer before glucose arrives. 4. This is a structural 21-day process, not an overnight correction, but a predictable documented path with a clear destination. If you are newly diagnosed and you are feeling overwhelmed, I want you to hear this clearly. A new diagnosis is a life sentence, is a signal. And now that you understand the mechanisms behind what that signal means, you have the actual tools to begin addressing it, not just managing it. Scroll down now. The link to the 21-day A1C reset guide is in the pinned comment directly below this video, the very first comment you will see. It is also in the description. Click it, and you will find the complete day-by-day blueprint waiting for you. I will see you in the next one. The content in this video is provided strictly for educational and informational purposes. It does not constitute medical advice, clinical diagnosis, or personalized treatment guidance of any kind. The mechanisms described, including hepatic gluconeogenesis, first phase insulin response, GP signaling, GLP-1 activity, and AMP pathway activation, are based on published peer-reviewed research and are presented to educate, not to replace clinical care. Apple cider vinegar dietary fat primers, soluble fiber protocols, and food sequences strategies are dietary tools, not medications. Individual metabolic responses vary significantly. These approaches may not be appropriate for all individuals, including those with kidney disease, gastroparesis, or other metabolic conditions. Do not discontinue, reduce, or adjust any prescribed diabetes medication, including metformin, insulin, or GLP-1 receptor agonists, based on the content of this video or any companion guide. Always work directly with your physician, endocrinologist, or a registered dietitian to manage a type 2 diabetes diagnosis and modify any aspect of your treatment plan.